The room was silent when the call came in, the kind of silence that carries a weight you can feel pressing against your chest. A police officer sat at his desk, unaware that the next few moments would shatter the fragile balance between his duty and his heart. He had faced criminals, liars, and desperate souls, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to hear. The words on the other end of the line felt like a dagger. His own son was a suspect. His badge suddenly felt heavier, almost suffocating, as if it knew the impossible choice that now lay ahead. Imagine the person you love most in this world, the one you'd give anything to protect. Now imagine being told that this person has crossed the line, that they are no longer just family, but part of the very world you've sworn to fight against. The officer's chest tightened, torn between the instinct to protect his child and the duty to uphold the law. It was a storm of emotions, shock, disbelief, and a creeping sense of betrayal. Could this really be happening? Or was it some cruel mistake? As he drove through the city streets, flashing lights reflecting against the windshield, his mind replayed memories of his son. The first time he held him in his arms, the countless nights spent teaching him right from wrong, the laughter they once shared. How could those same hands he guided now be accused of breaking the very laws he swore to defend? His heart screamed for mercy, but his conscience whispered about justice. Every mile closer to his destination felt like a mile away from the man he thought he was. People often believe that police officers are unshakable, that the badge shields them from human pain. But behind every uniform is a beating heart that loves, fears, and breaks. Tonight, that truth was written across his face. The radio crackled with updates, but he barely heard them. He wasn't just an officer anymore, he was a father on the edge of losing everything he believed in. Would his son look at him with fear, with anger, or with regret when the moment came? This wasn't just about crime anymore, it was about the fragile line between love and duty. How far can someone go to protect family without losing themselves? How do you choose between the bond of blood and the promise of justice? These are questions that pierce deeper than any weapon, questions that would define not only this officer's career but his very soul. And tonight, he would be forced to answer them. The night carried more than silence, it carried prophecy. You know when something inside you whispers that life is about to change, even before the truth is spoken aloud. That whisper is not a voice you can escape, nor a sound you can silence. It is destiny breathing against your ear, warning you that the road ahead will demand more than you ever thought you could give. And here, in this moment, a father and an officer were no longer two separate men. They were colliding into one, forced into a choice that could tear both apart. Every story has a breaking point, and you are standing in the presence of one now. Think of the years spent building trust, teaching lessons, and planting seeds of hope, only to discover that something has taken root in secret, something you never saw growing. The reports were clear, the evidence undeniable, and the name attached to it all was one he had spoken with pride his entire life. You feel the chill of betrayal crawling up your spine, not from an enemy, but from blood that was supposed to be unshakable. You cannot run from the truth, even when it comes wearing the face of someone you love. He had seen criminals in countless forms, eyes filled with guilt, anger, or fear, but never imagined seeing those same shadows in his own son. How could the boy he raised, the boy he swore to guide, now walk the path of destruction? And yet, the world does not pause for a father's grief. The badge does not bend to emotion. The law does not ask if you are ready. It only demands that you obey. There comes a moment when the heart and the oath wage war inside you. You feel it pressing down, a weight so fierce it nearly steals your breath. To be a father is to protect, but to be an officer is to uphold. And when those two collide, something inside must break. You know the world is watching, even if no eyes are there. The choice will echo far beyond tonight, reaching into eternity, defining who you are when stripped of all excuses. This is not just a story of crime, nor is it simply about justice. This is a story of what happens when fate drags you into a place you swore you would never go. It is the test of loyalty against truth, of love against duty, of the man you wanted to be against the man you are forced to become. And in that clash, you discover not only who you are, but what you are willing to sacrifice. The call that shattered everything came with a chilling clarity. Dispatchers spoke the name, his son's name, as though it were any other suspect, just another case number in a long line of crimes. But for him, it was the sound of his heart breaking in real time. Reports said a robbery had gone wrong. An armed store clerk had nearly lost his life. Surveillance footage caught the face of one of the culprits. And there was no denying it, he saw his son's reflection staring back at him, wearing a mask of recklessness he never believed could exist. The world around him seemed to spin. His uniform, once a symbol of honor, now felt like chains locking him into an unthinkable fate. He wanted to reject it, to scream that the system was wrong, but deep down he knew what his eyes confirmed. There would be no escape, no way to bury this truth. Tonight, his son was no longer just his boy. Tonight, he had become the very criminal he was sworn to stop. When he arrived at the station, the air was thick with whispers. Colleagues avoided his eyes, some with pity, others with judgment, as if they were all waiting to see whether he would crumble or stand. He had built a reputation of strength, a man who never flinched in the face of duty, but this was different. This was personal. Files were placed before him, cold, lifeless papers carrying the weight of his son's choices. Every word on those pages screamed betrayal, yet each one also carried the shadow of his own reflection. Had he failed as a father? Had he missed the signs? The thought gnawed at him like a predator, merciless and unforgiving. He could almost hear his son's laughter from childhood, echoing against the sterile walls, mocking the cruel distance between who he had been and who he had become. And there, surrounded by law and silence, he knew his heart was walking into battle. The decision was inevitable. A warrant had been issued. His son would be brought in, and by cruel twist of fate, the task had fallen on him. He could have stepped aside, let another officer take his place, but deep inside he knew that would have been cowardice. The man who had raised him, who had sworn to guide him, could not run when it mattered most. Yet each step forward felt like walking deeper into a pit of fire. His badge weighed heavy against his chest, burning like an iron reminder of the oath he had taken. And though part of him begged for someone else to bear this cross, another part whispered that this was destiny. For love is not only holding someone close in the light, sometimes it is dragging them out of the darkness, even if they despise you for it. He drove in silence toward the place where his son had been spotted. The city seemed unfamiliar, as though the streets themselves had betrayed him. Neon lights blurred in his vision, reminding him of nights spent teaching his boy how to drive, laughing at mistakes, promising a future full of hope. Now, those same streets carried him toward confrontation. His hands gripped the wheel until his knuckles whitened, each turn bringing him closer to a truth he wished he could erase. He whispered prayers no one could hear, bargaining with God, begging for a miracle, asking that this night somehow be undone. But heaven was silent. And in that silence, he realized this was a road no father should ever travel, yet one he could not avoid. The location was a crumbling apartment complex, the kind of place where dreams go to die. Broken windows reflected fragments of city light, and graffiti scarred the walls with silent screams of the forgotten. His son had been hiding here, blending into the shadows of the broken. As he stepped out of the car, the weight of his gun and the echo of his footsteps filled the night. Every instinct as a father wanted to run, to find him and embrace him, to tell him it wasn't too late. But every instinct as an officer warned him that the boy inside was not the same child he had raised. He was unpredictable now, dangerous, a man cornered by his own mistakes. And that collision of instincts left him trembling, torn in two by love and law. When he entered the building, the smell of decay clung to the air. Broken doors, flickering lights, and silence heavy enough to crush the spirit. He moved carefully, his heart racing faster than his footsteps, as if each beat announced his presence. His mind flooded with memories, bedtime stories, scraped knees, the innocent trust of a boy who once believed his father could fix everything. But what happens when the hero becomes the hunter? What happens when the protector becomes the jailer? The questions haunted him with every step down that narrow hallway. He knew what he had to do, but he also knew that this would leave scars no court, no badge, and no forgiveness could ever erase. Then came the sound, a door creaking at the end of the hall, followed by a voice he recognized instantly. It was his son. That voice, deeper now, shaped by years and mistakes, still carried the echo of the child he remembered. He froze, every muscle locked between the urge to run forward and the terror of what awaited. For a moment, time seemed to stop, and all he could hear was his own breathing. He wanted to call his name, to let his heart speak before his duty silenced it. But he also knew that one wrong word, one wrong move, could ignite a storm. His son was armed. His son was desperate. And desperation is the deadliest weapon of all. The door opened wider, and their eyes met across the shadows. A father and a son, bound by blood but divided by choices. For an instant, the years dissolved. He saw the boy holding his hand at the park, the teenager arguing about curfews, the young man searching for freedom. But overlaying those images was the reality before him, a criminal, a suspect, a man standing on the other side of the law. His son's eyes were wild, filled with fear and defiance, and in that gaze he found no innocence left. It was as though life had taken the boy he loved and reshaped him into someone he no longer recognized. Yet beneath the chaos, a flicker of shame trembled, an unspoken plea for something he could not name. The silence between them felt like a battlefield. Neither moved, neither spoke, as though words themselves might shatter what fragile thread connected them. Finally, his son broke it. His voice cracked with anger, but also with pain. "You came for me," he said, not as a question, but as an accusation. The words stabbed deep, for they were both true and unfair. Yes, he had come for him. But not as a father who wanted to punish, not as a stranger who sought justice. He had come because love sometimes demands the hardest sacrifice of all, the sacrifice of being hated in order to save. He steadied his voice, his badge heavy, his heart heavier. "I had no choice," he whispered, though inside, he knew he would carry the weight of this choice forever. In that moment, the gun in his son's hand became more than a weapon. It was a symbol of the wall between them. The father wanted to strip it away, to remind him that life had more to offer than destruction. But the officer inside knew that gun made this moment unpredictable, dangerous beyond words. He extended his hand slowly, not to reach for the weapon, but to reach for the boy hidden beneath the anger. "You can still choose," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. "You can still come back." Yet he knew redemption was not a gift one could hand over. It was a battle the soul had to fight alone, and his son's soul was already teetering on the edge. The air crackled with tension, every second stretching into eternity. His son's hand shook, the gun wavering as though caught between two worlds. The boy he raised was still there, buried under fear, shame, and pride, but reaching him felt impossible. Tears burned his eyes, but he held them back, unwilling to show weakness in a moment where strength was demanded. "If you pull that trigger," he said softly, "you won't just kill me. You'll kill the man I raised you to be." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp, piercing deeper than any bullet. His son blinked, his jaw clenched, and for the briefest second, hesitation flickered across his face. Hesitation, however, is fragile. Sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer, shattering the fragile silence. His son's eyes widened, panic flooding his expression. "They're coming for me," he said, voice cracking with dread. The father stepped closer, his voice steady though his body trembled. "They don't have to," he said. "Surrender now, and it doesn't end like this." But his son shook his head violently, tears mixing with rage. "It's too late," he spat, and in those words was the despair of a man who had lost faith in redemption. The father's chest ached with every breath, for he knew the next few moments would determine whether his son lived, died, or vanished forever into the system he once believed could save him. Then came the breaking point. His son raised the weapon, not fully, but enough to ignite every instinct of survival. The officer in him reached for his own gun, but the father in him hesitated. Time slowed, stretching into fragments. He could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears, feel the weight of eternity pressing against his shoulders. He wanted to scream, to beg, to tear the gun from his son's hand and throw it into the night. But he also knew one wrong move, one trigger pulled, would destroy everything. The tension was unbearable, a knife edge between salvation and ruin. And in that suspended moment, the world itself seemed to hold its breath. The flood of sirens grew louder, red and blue lights bleeding through the cracked windows. Officers poured into the building, their footsteps echoing through the halls. Orders were shouted, voices filled with authority, demanding surrender. But to his son, it felt like a trap closing in. Fear twisted his features, and his hand shook violently, the gun clutched tighter as though it were his only lifeline. The father raised his hands, stepping between his son and the others, his voice trembling but strong. "He's mine," he said to them, not in arrogance, but in desperation. "Let me end this." But he knew he was walking on borrowed time. Every second risked an explosion of violence no one could undo. And there, in that storm of flashing lights and chaos, the truth burned like fire. Love and law had collided in the cruelest way, tearing open wounds that would never fully heal. A father stood before his son, torn between saving him and stopping him, knowing that both roads carried pain beyond measure. And as the world demanded justice, his heart demanded mercy. This was the moment fate had been leading him toward, the moment that would define him forever. The man, the father, the officer, three identities, one soul, breaking apart beneath the weight of a single choice. In life, we are often placed before choices that cut deeper than we ever imagined. Sometimes it is not the world outside that becomes our battlefield, but the conflict inside our own hearts. The story you have heard is not just about a father and a son, nor about law and crime, it is about the fragile thread that binds love, responsibility, and faith. When everything seems lost, when pain outweighs understanding, it is faith that whispers there is still hope. Even in the darkest valleys, a spark of redemption can be born. Perhaps you too have faced moments where love and truth collided, where doing what was right meant breaking your own heart. Those moments remind us that life is not meant to be easy, but to shape us into stronger souls. Pain may come, but it never has the final word. Each trial is a test, and each tear carries the seed of growth. Just as the officer had to walk through fire to face his son, we too walk through storms meant not to destroy us, but to refine us. Remember this: no mistake is beyond redemption, and no life is too broken to be rebuilt. Forgiveness is not weakness, it is strength. Choosing justice does not erase love, and choosing love does not erase justice. The two can exist together, even when it feels impossible. Your story, your pain, your challenges, they can all be transformed into something greater when you allow faith to guide you. So if you are standing today in front of impossible choices, do not let fear define you. Lift your eyes above the storm and trust that there is a greater purpose working through your struggle. What feels like the end can become the beginning of something far more powerful. Hold on to love, hold on to faith, and believe that tomorrow can be brighter than today. And as we close this story, let it echo within you as a reminder: the hardest battles are not meant to break you, but to reveal the strength and faith already within you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment, for opening your heart to this story and its lessons. If this touched you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, to share this message with someone who needs it, and to help spread light where darkness tries to reign. Together, we can turn pain into hope, and hope into change.